The use of pesticide on crops and other plants has been an issue of debate for years. It's a scientific issue and often an emotional one as well. Now that the Trump administration is in control of pesticide use, the debate has grown even more contentious. New Jersey lawmakers are considering legislation to ban Chlorpyrifos, a broad-range pesticide that scientists at the Environmental Protection Agency recommended for a nationwide ban during the Obama administration. President Trump's EPA administrator, Scott Pruitt, recently decided not to move forward with the ban. That resulted in the introduction of legislation in New Jersey that would ban the substance here in the Garden State. What you're about to hear is the debate from the pro-ban and anti-ban camps delivered this month before a meeting of the state Senate's Environment and Energy Committee. Spoiler alert, you don't need to listen to the roughly 20 minutes excerpt that follows to learn the result. We'll tell you right now. What happened is that after hearing from a half dozen witnesses, the committee decided neither to release nor to reject the bill. Instead, additional scientific background material will be sought, and the bill will be rescheduled at a later time. If you're interested in the subject of pesticides and food safety, however, you will be well served by listening to the testimony that follows. I think you'll find it informative, and you'll gain a greater appreciation for why decisions like this are often more difficult to make than you might imagine. We start with an introduction to the legislation by Committee Chairman Bob Smith, a Democrat from Middlesex County, which is in the center of New Jersey and is the home to Rutgers University.
Senator Thompson? Senator Bateman?
Yes.
Governor Cody?
Yes.
Senator Greenstein?
Yes.
Senator Smith?
Yes.
And our next bill will be Senate Bill 3405 by Senator Turner. It prohibits the use of Chlorpyrifos insecticide. I thought it would be helpful to just read into the record some of the bill comments we received. So it says, it is effective against insects and worms. Although it was once used in residential settings and golf courses to control mosquitoes, cockroaches, and fire ants, it is now primarily used in agriculture. Exposure to Chlorpyrifos has been linked to many negative health effects in humans, including neurological defects, developmental disorders, and autoimmune disorders. Exposure also poses special risk to pregnant women, even in small doses, as the chemical may retard the mental development of a fetus. In New Jersey, Chlorpyrifos is currently regulated as a, quote, restricted use pesticide, which means that it can be purchased and or used only by certified and licensed responsible pesticide applicators, or used only by persons working under their direct supervision. Despite these restrictions and the negative implications for public health that are associated with Chlorpyrifos exposure, the chemical is still widely used. This bill would promote the health and safety of the people of the state by protecting them from this harmful chemical. She rejected a ban on Chlorpyrifos last spring, even though the Environmental Protection Agency under the Obama administration had recommended banning it. EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt cited uncertainty about the neurodevelopmental effects of early life exposure to the pesticide. However, manufacturers voluntarily phased out residential use of the compound in 2001. What? O'Malley in favor. Mr. O'Malley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the summary that you just read is really a summary of the Trump administration's attacks on our public health and the rollbacks that Administrator Pruitt has moved forward on this chemical is a clear sign that public health is losing at the national level. It's time for New Jersey to step up. And the reason is quite simple. The science is incredibly clear that this is a contaminant that has human health impacts. We saw 17 years ago the EPA banned this in use in residential uses. So this was very effective. It used to be found in Raid, and the reason why is because it was very effective. The reason why it's still used on crops is because it is effective. It's so effective that it's found to have levels of more than 140 times on our current fruits and vegetables. It's a 2012 study. And also so pervasive that 87% of blood from umbilical cords shows some level of this chemical. So this is a clear wake-up call for us. If we're looking at the EPA research, including that of Columbia University, there's a clear sign that we have too much of this chemical, which is a derivative of nerve gas, in our food system and in our blood supply. And it's imperative that New Jersey listen to the science and stand up to the rollback to the Trump administration to ban this contaminant. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ed Waters. I'm here today representing the New Jersey Green Industry Council. We are an umbrella organization representing lawn care, landscape, arborists, pest management, and golf course industries. And we are opposing this because, first of all, this is the most widely used pesticide, and there is no scientific proof that it needs to be taken out of our toolbox. I do agree with Doug Malley on one thing. We should look at the science. And the science says that this doesn't need to be banned. That's why Scott Pruitt pulled back on it. The folks in the EPA who recommended it being banned were working on the precautionary principle. Well, under the precautionary principle, no one in this room would get out of bed in the morning. Because if you get out of bed, you might slip and fall in the shower, bang your head on the soap dish, and die. So you wouldn't get out of bed. So we should look at toxicology studies, which are proving that this is a safe pesticide to use. And as far as the voluntary removal from the companies, that was based on costs, not based on science. When the EPA changed their registration policy, it became more costly for the companies to register these products. So they did voluntarily take them off the shelves, but it had to do with costs, not with science. And I'll take any questions.
The next comment comes from committee member Kip Bateman, a Republican from Somerset County.
The last person that I would trust with our environment is Scott Pruitt. I think and I've heard this from many people, including a very former popular governor. He's probably the worst appointment served to me. And so, that scared me right away because I think he's the worst thing for the environment. So that would turn me off immediately.
Any other questions for Mr. Waters? Thank you for your testimony. Steve Lee IV, American Cranberry Growers Association, in opposition.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Lee IV. I'm a sixth-generation cranberry grower here in New Jersey. My family's been growing cranberries since 1868. The day after tomorrow, everyone in this room is going to be thinking about where we're headed on Wednesday night for dinner on Thursday. New Jersey is a huge part of what's going to be on your plate, hopefully. That little red stuff next to the turkey is cranberry sauce, and a big part of our heritage in my family and the families throughout the U.S. in the other 5 growing regions where they're grown goes to that plate. By getting in the business of regulating pesticides here in New Jersey, specifically with this bill, will put us at a very competitive disadvantage. I have with me the label, and the correct pronunciation is Chlorpyrifos, and it's very difficult to pronunciate. But this is the EPA regulations and standards by which this material is applied. Whether you're in New Jersey, Wisconsin, Oregon, Washington, it does not matter. And it's registered by the EPA. So the EPA did an awful lot of work in putting together a label which allows farmers to be able to use this material. I can tell you that this particular material, there was a question that was raised earlier, what other alternatives are there? This particular material is the red switch that we turn on if we can't do anything else. And I'll give you a perfect example. In 2015, we had in one of our beds on our farm, we had a substantial amount of bloom loss. And if you've ever been to a cranberry bog, and the most gorgeous time people will say is in the fall with the leaves and the red berries floating and so forth. But in my opinion, the most beautiful time is in the early spring and in June during bloom, because you have just a sea of white flowers that are scattered throughout the bog. And back in 2015, we had some patches where there was no flowers, which was very concerning to us. Through the work of Rutgers and through the work of our entomologists and the folks on the farm, we discovered that we had a mirid that had not been seen in Massachusetts or New Jersey since about 1936. What we discovered was that this mirid had kind of popped up, and unfortunately, we didn't have any materials that would be able to combat the mirid. Before it damaged the rest of our crops, we made a decision to do an application of this after pollination. What it did was it took care of the mirid, and it gave us bloom for the following year. Now, one thing it did was it killed the terminal buds for that particular crop. So we lost a year's crop because of one insect. If I hadn't been able to spray this, by the regulations that are already given to me by EPA, I probably would have not had a crop that year. I have no issue at all with looking at the materials that we use on a global and a national perspective. We go through a lot of regulations in farming to begin with. Please do not put another layer of regulation on top of me for this particular material, which probably has some science behind it. There is a reference that was made for this guy over here. I'm not even sure who he is. I'm sorry. With all due respect, I know you have a suit and you probably spent a lot of time here, but I don't. The study he's referring to is from Colombia, and it's not complete, and that's already been admitted by the chemical companies as well as by the farmers. So I've got no problem with looking at the materials we use and say maybe is there an alternative, or is this really safe, or are there other options? But do it on a national level. Don't do it at a state level, please. This puts us at a serious competitive disadvantage if we begin to get in the business of regulating what materials we can use in New Jersey. Our crop in New Jersey this year, say this, but we hit 450,000 barrels this year. Our average of the last 3 has been 570. We had a lot of issues this year with weather. That stuff I can't control. I can't do anything about weather. But this will kill me. This will absolutely kill New Jersey's industry if we do this. I'll be happy to take any questions.
What you're waiving there, alternatives that you're aware of that would be less damaging.
No, they're not. There's 2 materials. One of them is called Confirm. One of them is called Intrepid, which are 2 insecticides that we also have in our toolbox, but they're not broad spectrum. This is a broad spectrum insecticide. We're very careful using this. In fact, this is a material that we don't use very often. We probably used this material once or twice in the last 7 years. We try not to do this. We don't live by the spray and pray method. We participate in what's called integrated pest management, where we specifically spray when we reach a threshold. And when we get a certain threshold, then we make that decision to spray or not. And the one thing this was able to save us in New Jersey specifically was with this mirid that we had back in 2015. But if we didn't have this, we have nothing.
Jim?
The next comment comes from committee member Richard Cody, a Democrat from Essex County.
Yeah, my problem is we're sitting here as lay people. We don't have cranberry bogs where I come from. How in the hell am I supposed to know who's right and who's wrong on a chemical based on some people's opinion? And if at a hearing, that'll last maybe half an hour. I don't think we should be voting.
Senator Linda Greenstein from Mercer County, a Democrat.
Years and years ago, I'm not sure what kinds of, say 100 years ago, I'm not sure what kind of pesticides were in use. Obviously, cranberries were produced. Now, whether as large a crop was produced, but we want to make sure that we have all of the science, see all of the alternatives, and have a real understanding of whether this is the only way to go or whether there are other ways to go. I suspect there are other ways to go.
Senator, I recognize your viewpoint.
I hate to bring up politics, but I do feel, as Senator Bateman said earlier, that we're really in a new place when it comes to the environment. And it's hard to depend on the EPA, given some of the standards that they seem to be endorsing. And maybe New Jersey will have to take a more active role. I agree with you, up until recently, that would be the case, that it should be done on a national level. But right now, I think we have some real issues going on.
I can also tell you that irregardless of who the president is in Washington, I'm still going to be growing cranberries and do the best I can with what tools I have, and this is a tool that I need to have. Yes, sir. Any other questions? Thank you, folks.
Hi, I'm testifying on behalf of my husband and myself. We're organic farmers in Hunterdon County on a preserve farm, and just really support the ban of chlorpyrifos, and the EPA's own scientists did recommend that this be banned for use in March, and the current administration went against their own scientists to go against that ban. Chlorpyrifos began use in 1965. So I just wanted to say we wholeheartedly support the ban. Thank you.
Mr. Wengren, Farm Bureau.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss this bill today. So along with cranberries, apples, we found when we were touring our apple orchards, this is how the chemical is used in apples currently. Most apple varieties are grafted. You have a rootstock and then the varietal on top. And in the grafting process, you have risks of getting nematodes and worms that get inside the graft, and you don't know the damage is there until the following spring. So most guys treat the trunk of the trees when they plant them with, we call it Lorsban. It's just so much easier to say. Lorsban is the trade name. And so it's used, and again, rarely within the industry, but often specifically for these broad spectrum, because you don't know which variety of the nematode or thing is underneath the barks until springtime when they hatch, and that's why it's used as widely as it is. You saw the regulatory sheet, how careful they have to be when using it. I don't think anybody over applies it in the industry. I'll leave the chemical people to talk about the chemistry, the approval process, things that go through EPA for registration, and this is one of them. They get looked at every 7 years. They have to be re-registered. The chemicals that we talk about, are there alternatives? What we had with the thing that hit the cranberries was this was the only chemical around long enough to be labeled for treating that thing. The newer chemicals, it hasn't been around, it was never tested against, so their efficacy, their use, he needed to use something that the label says you can treat that insect with this chemical, and that's the problem within the industry. This one treats a lot of stuff, and when you need to use it, it's the tool that's available and most effective for a broad range of insects. It's costly to go through the registration process. Rutgers is part of the team of IR4 registration things. Chemical companies pay to have all the efficacy studies. The growers and producers also participate in those studies to make sure that their crops can be treated without harmful effects, without bud burn and the things that would harm the plant and stuff like that. So we think the system works. There's been a disagreement on you heard it's been available since 1965. Over 40 years, 50 years of history of this chemical. And all of a sudden, new studies come up and they get reevaluated and they get looked at. And as science changes and things go, I think Pruitt made the call that the supportive science was stronger than the need to pull it science. And that was the debate in Washington. For New Jersey, without our DEP looking into and studying the issue at the same level, it's disconcerting to see a legislative committee Governor Cody said it. He said, we're not the experts, and you're making a decision that really impacts the lives of a lot of growers and producers in the state.
Thank you for your comments. Dave Pringle, Clean Water.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In this day and age, we need to rely on science, and the science is clear, notwithstanding where the federal administration is at these days.
Where is the science clear? Because that seems to be the problem that I've seen with the senators. Where is there a report in writing from scientists?
If you look at the EPA regulatory history, their scientists have concluded that this chemical should be banned, and we support that assessment.
We get up in the morning and read the health section of the paper, all right? One day it's going to say coffee is great for you, the next day it's not. On and on and on and on and on. I mean, so we have a one-day hearing for a half hour on this and decide, I mean, come on.
Nothing is certain in life other than death. But with science, you have to go with 95% certainty. That's where the scientists go, and the scientists are saying that this shouldn't be used.
So, and I think this is where this is going to go, because I don't want to put people in unremitting pain trying to figure this out. The senators make a valid point that we are laypersons, all right? But I think what we're going to do is to hold the bill to the next meeting. In between, I'd like to see the scientific reports. And I'd like to share them with everybody on the committee so we can see what the scientists have said, especially the EPA scientists before Pruitt.
But I'd also like to see how this maybe would put our farmers at a competitive disadvantage as well.
Right. Well, I'm concerned about the farm industry as well, but I really didn't like the comments about the impact on fetuses and what it does to babies, and being out there and measured in human beings as a chemical constituency in our tissues. But I agree with you. We need more information, Governor. You're absolutely right about that. And so, ball's in your park. And also, I'm going to ask OLS staff to chase down the EPA written recommendations about this from the EPA scientists. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, anything else you'd like to say?
There was additional testimony from the New Jersey Chemistry Council and from the Sierra Club, but the chairman's decision held, and the matter will be revisited at a future committee meeting. That's it for today's show, but we want to remind you that if environmental issues, news, legislation, and regulations in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, and Delaware are important to you, check out our daily newsletter, Enviropolitics. That's one word, Enviropolitics. You can receive the newsletter free for 30 days. You'll find us at enviropolitics.com. Also check out our Enviropolitics blog. Just Google it. And our Enviro Events calendar. Just Google Enviro-Events calendar. Thanks for listening and for reading. See you next time.